And I see we already have a hand up, so let's say welcome, area code 517. You are on the air. Who do we have?
Hello, this is John from Lansing.
Welcome. Good to hear your voice. Merry Christmas.
Thank you for being there. Same to you. I've been doing this breathing stuff, and a couple of days ago, my brother was in Vietnam when I was in 6th grade, and
right.
When he came back home, he was probably pretty messed up emotionally. And I remember in my younger days, we used to hold him down until the doctor got there. And
right.
So he went on through his life like that. And he died a few years ago. And but I've been doing the breathing exercises, and I've gotten some of his anger. And I don't know if I should do a worksheet on his anger or a worksheet on my anger, or how should I, so that I can help him get over the threshold that he's at. I think that's where we're at.
I hear you loud and clear, and I would say absolutely yes to on both questions. The component of the anger that's yours, and the component resonated by him, and probably both of you received genetically. And you could do, wake-up sheets as yourself in whatever circumstances arouse that anger, and/or you could imagine that you're your brother, perhaps go back and remember having to hold him down one of those times and what was going on for him, and do a worksheet as him. Ask his permission to do a worksheet as him at that time, and see what he informs you about. There's an interesting film out there. We talked about it, several months ago, or pardon me, a couple of years ago, I guess it is now, when it came out. It's called Concussion. And I don't know if you've seen it, but the physician who discovered the brain damage that's happening to, and was able to detail exactly what was going on in that movie, his work is portrayed, and he totally changed the NFL. His contributions have been monumental to the world in terms of understanding brain damage. But one of the things he did, as a medical doctor, and he did autopsies, is he would start out and do an autopsy on someone, of course, who's dead, but he would touch the body, and he would talk to the individual and explain what he was facing, explain his dilemma. And in this particular case, there's a football player who was a world-famous athlete and very admired in his hometown, which, if I remember correctly, was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His name was Iron Mike. And they show him starting the autopsy by touching Iron Mike's body and saying, people thought you were crazy, but there's something else going on here, and I can't do this on my own. I need your help. And he literally, you can watch him through the film, get guidance on what to do. And so in a similar way, I'd support you tapping into your brother's energy, perhaps going back to the moment where you were holding him down and your hands were on him, and talk to him in that posture and ask him what help he needs. Ask him what's going on, and then listen with your inner guidance. You will probably be amazed at what you get to hear and what you get to work through with and for him, and with and for yourself, as well as your whole bloodline.
All right. He showed me some things about war that I can't even see on this radio show, that I had no idea at all about.
Insanity.
Yeah, it's kind of scary too. But you talked about that movie, the one, Come and See My Neighborhood, or whatever it was.
Yes.
That was a
welcome.
good movie.
It's a beautiful day. You went to see it? Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, I took my 95-year-old mom. We both saw it and cried.
Oh, sweet. That's so sweet. That's awesome. Yeah, to me, watching how Fred Rogers worked with this guy. I mean, he's literally doing forgiveness work. It's just powerful and awesome to see. It's like he's in an intensive.
Reminds me of Michelle. That's why I leaned over and said to my mom, "This is like my therapist."
There you go. Now, are you listening, Michelle? Did you hear that compliment? Did you get it? Awesome.
I'm not sure if she's listening today.
And you know what, John? You and I and Jeannie and everybody can give that gift to everybody we touch if we're willing to do our work. You serve that purpose. I can just about see you sitting there with your mom, being that same space for your mom at 95. And who knows what she has gotten to resolve that will change her eternal life and yours as well. So keep passing it on, and we all have the ability to offer that to the world and to the people around us, every one of us. You know, the world wants to set it up. It has to be this professional thing that's all about how much money you pay or you get paid. Each and every one of us, and our objective here is to empower each and every person. Or I shouldn't say empower, because we can't empower anybody, but to uncover the empowerment that is in each of us to be able to do that the world has covered up for the sake of money. So keep passing it on, sir. That's awesome.
All right, and thank you for everything, and Merry Christmas to Jeannie and you. May your gifts be rewarded.
Thank you.
Thank
Bless
you.
Thank you.
We hold the space for the best year yet of your eternal life and everybody that's listening, as well as happy holy days, whether you're celebrating Hanukkah or Christmas or whatever it happens to be.
Okay.
Cool. Have a blessed one, sir.
Thank you. I
appreciate you.
I do, and I think
Oh, I lost you there, John. Say that again.
I said I do, and I think I'll let him.
All right. Yeah. Have a blessed one. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
All right, Jeannie. Do we have anybody else out there in the phone queue with a hand up, or anybody in the chat room with a thought for us?
This is chatting with me from which way?
You're cutting in and out.
And,
I can't understand your words. Could you repeat that?
Okay. I just said that Bob is with us, but if I don't have a good connection here, I'll just not talk and you go for it. But nobody has a hand up.
Okay. You came back loud and clear there. You just, in that space in between, it's kind of disappeared. So, all right. Well, we're honored and delighted for everybody who chooses to join us, and thanks for being with us. We are here to, as I say, help to uncover the empowerment that's in each and every one of us, that we can be of that kind of support and create the kind of healing that is reflected in that movie, It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And if you haven't seen it yet, make it one of your Christmas projects to go and see. It is really worth seeing. It's a film really worth supporting. So, Hold the Space should get the chance to do that. Beyond that, what I had in mind for today was to talk about perception in a little different way, or maybe to sum up some of the things we've said in the past from a perspective. And you perhaps heard me in the past talk about defining the word as a tool of communication. So I think that in our culture is a reasonable definition that a word is a tool of communication. And communication indicates that when that tool is being used, there's an interaction between two or more people. In this case, you as an audience are receiving the information and I'm getting to transmit it. Or when someone like John calls in, uses words, we're receiving it and John is sending out those words. So there's that interaction between two when words are being used. And so the question that I ask at this point, when we're in an intensive and I bring this topic up, is notice that if you step back and observe your mind in operation, and one of the things we want to empower in people is the ability to become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions. So as you step back and observe your mind in operation, notice that there are words running in your head. And those words, those tools of communication, are not being spoken outside of yourself or to someone else. And notice that's an ongoing conversation. And the question becomes, who's in there with you? Who's telling you the meaning of everything that you hold for everything? And just contemplate that question for a moment. And then notice that when the mind is communicating meanings about things, that it's communicating from the content that it has. You know, if there is not content in the mind, you know, there's a totally new object you've never seen before, and you look at it, and you puzzle, and you try to figure out what it is, and you have no concept, you have no clue. Your mind has nothing there to give you about that. Then the mind does not have information stored about whatever that object or experience is. But notice that if it has information stored about that object, that obviously tells us that it's something from the past. Now, I'm going to give you a simple instruction set. You've got brain cells for the words I'm going to use from your past. Pretty much everybody will have that. But what I'm going to ask you to do right now, and just observe what happens in your mind, is I'm going to ask you to take your left hand and put it on your gizzard. Would everybody do that? Put your left hand on your gizzard. And unless I miss my guess, notice what just happened in your mind. Your mind went something like this. Let's see, gizzards. Chickens have a gizzard. Do humans have a gizzard? Is it up here, my throat, my upper chest, like under my jaw? Where is my gizzard? So just observe your mind. When you can slow it down a little bit, which that experience does, it's a little easier to observe that your mind went searching through your past to find a meaning for something that's happening in the present. Which means that everything that is constructed from the body's mind is from the past, and every perceptual construct. In other words, everything that you see is an interpretation of something from the past. If you live unquestioningly in that construct, then you live your life in the past. Of those who live their lives in the past, Yeshua 2,000 years ago said, let the dead bury the dead. Let the blind lead the blind. If something from your past is telling you the meaning of this present moment experience, then you just shut out the ability to have a present moment experience. Even if what your mind told you was true and correct. Even if what your mind told you was true and correct, you were still having a past experience and not a present moment actual live experience. The dead bury the dead. What this work is about, what forgiveness is about, is collapsing those energetic patterns from the past, understanding how to live in the eternal forces in which you live, move, and have your being as a present conscious being, living in the mind that experiences actual life in the actual moment, not just interpretations from the past. And most people, beyond unrecalled early childhood, have never had that experience. The world structured their minds to look at things in a certain way, and especially if the context that the mind gives to a circumstance is some form of hostility or fear, then you are dead and you are living in the past, replicating past experiences. And people say, well, I've had some wonderful experiences in my past, so what I want to do is keep having more of those wonderful experiences. Well, if I have a wonderful experience stored in my mind, something triggers that wonderful experience into activity, and I have another wonderful experience from the past. Am I alive yet? The answer is no. There's an interesting parable. Go back and read the story of the prodigal son. And that's a story of us leaving our human lives behind and learning to live in the past. Learning to live with no human life actually present, no experience of the physiological presence of love which we're designed for, and going out as the world has taught us to do and looking for love in all the wrong places, trying to find it somewhere out there. When what we're working toward doing is living as human beings now. So let's listen to this parable. This young man gathers his inheritance, all of the gifts he's been given. And he decides what his father wants for him and wants him to do isn't worth the powder to blow it to hell. And so he leaves, takes everything he's got. He takes all of his faculties with him and leaves. And he goes out into a far land. What do you suppose the far land is in that parable? It's the body's mind. It's a body-mind unit with 1,000 generations of insanity stored in it. And he squanders his resources. He loses everything. And then he realizes that he'd be better off. He wants to return to the Father's house. And he realizes that he'd be better off slopping pigs than living in this non-life past. Now, that's a pretty important little parable there about the pigs, because a pig was an animal that, in that culture, they understood there was no such thing as a pig that wasn't totally filled with parasites. By the way, that's why they tell you to cook your pork really well, so that you can have well-cooked parasites, because there's no such thing as a pig without them. You might want to think about that. But beyond that, to have used that particular analogy, it's really saying, man, I have scraped, by leaving my father's mansion, I have scraped the bottom of the barrel, and I'd be happy to go back and slop the pigs, because I'd be so much better off. So the young man turns around, and as each person who's doing this work is heading back to his father's house, doing the return journey. And listen to what's said when the father sees the son coming back. He speaks to the brother who never left. Now, the brother who never left will never gain conscious awareness. But to that brother, he says, go and kill the fatted calf. That's a pretty valuable possession. We're going to take the best of our products, and we are going to create a feast for your brother who was dead. Notice what death is there. This is the first death. The scriptures, they talk about he who overcomes, that is, overcomes the propensity to live in the mind of the past, in the hostility and fear-based mind, in the replicate mind. He will not taste of the second death. The first death I would offer is losing awareness to whatever's going on in the body's mind. And to wake up to who we are as human beings. And an important step in doing that for me is hold a newborn. Remember the first time you held a newborn child and tap into the essence of that newborn. There's human life. There's the experience of love. And you're designed to live out of that. And if you don't have one of those, then you've got work to do. You better get back to the Father's house in a hurry. except that you can't storm the gates. You can't do it in a hurry. It's a process. You got to take your time to learn how to reacquaint yourself. Instead of living in perceptual constructs in the mind from the past, you got to learn to live in relationship with the eternal forces in which you live, move, and have your being. And doing that is called living within the law. Law in Aramaic had nothing to do with the rules of a superior that you need to obey. Kings want you to believe that law is, this superior authority laid down this law and you better obey it or you will be severely punished. Total, complete fraud and falsehood. That's all stuff from the past, programmed by kings because people want kings to be living in that non-being mind. Because you can't get people who are actually alive and awake and functioning as humans to go out and kill on command, steal other people's properties, as kings are wont to do. So the father, as he sees the son returning, is your brother who was, now the brother who stayed home was like, hey, what am I, chopped liver? Why don't I get the party that my brother's going to get? Father says, well, you were always with me. You never left. So you don't get this new level of spiritual self-awareness that your brother has earned in his journey. But we're going to celebrate that he's come back to life. Death is not permanent. We can awaken to who we are as human beings. But you've got to recognize that everything in the mind, everything the mind plays out for you, everything is from the past and is death. Pretty significant piece of work to go back to awakening and to make sure that every experience that you have, you're not going to stop your mind from serving you up experiences, but you treat it more like your computer. When you need information from your computer, you go to it, you get information from your computer. Doesn't run your life, doesn't run your perception, is not the end all and the be all, because you have other awarenesses. But if you only have awareness through your mind of your environment, then you're dead. You've left. And your mind will give a context to everything. And its context, by and large, if you take a look around at the world and what most people are experiencing today, until they start to do their work. John, we thank you for the work you do. Doing that with your mom is awesome. And the work you're willing to do for your brother. And, if we go back a year or so ago when John started calling, he was doing he was in some pretty heavy spaces. And I just acknowledge you, John, for the work that you've done in a very short period of time by taking the tools and effectively using them. And Michelle, how you've effectively taught them to John so that he can take them and move forward in this process. Because those stuck in the mind of man, what was called the mind of man, it's interesting. You go back and hear another parable where Peter, he's going to save Yeshua from this crucifixion. Remember that scenario where Yeshua steps out of this is all about living human life. It's nothing to do with religion. It's telling us something that we can understand beyond the mind's interpretations, which will simply keep us locked in the past. You've got to be out of your mind. So Yeshua steps out of the Garden of Gethsemane, and here's the high priest servant. And before that all happens, Peter says, "Oh, we're going to save you. We'll keep this from happening to you." Do you remember what what Yeshua called Peter? He called Peter Satan. He said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And then read that passage carefully, and he defines what he's really talking about and what his whole work is about. And it's not about, go say my magic name and then you'll be saved. What does he say to Peter? He says, "Get thee behind me, for you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God." In other words, you're not in touch with being. You're not in touch with an experience outside of what's going on in your own limited, little, selfish, self-centered body-mind unit. And how everything you think impacts you. And you have no idea how you're impacting everything. So what does it mean to live in the plan of God? It means that whatever our experiences in the world, whatever this body-mind unit is doing, you will bring your original created essence, love, into the picture and give a context to everything. Watch the movie that John just brought up, It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And watch how Mr. Rogers, and it's based on a true story, and it's not so much based on Mr. Rogers' life as the 10,000-word article that appeared in Esquire magazine in 1998. You can Google it and read it. And it's a story of this writer who's lived in such a miserable life that just before he met Rogers, he went to his sister's wedding, and he punched his father in the face, punched him out. And then somebody punched him out, and he goes to meet Mr. Rogers with his black and blue bruised face. Now, somebody could have said to him, "Oh, what a terrible thing. Oh, you poor baby, what happened to you?" Does Mr. Rogers do that? No. He gives a context to it. Mr. Rogers brings the active presence of love to this man's story. And so the context he offers is simply being and holding the space of love. And you watch him process this guy. Remember, our definition of processing is the ability to hold love conscious, active, and present when something less than love comes up. So Mr. Rogers gives the context of functioning, not loving this guy, but functioning as a being created of active present love. And by so doing, he transforms this whole guy's family. And he has conversations with Mr. Rogers along the way, like, Mac, how do you do this? How do you do this? And Mr. Rogers starts to explain, I have a lot of tools. They actually do the storytelling very well because they bring his wife in, and he shares some of the tools that he uses. He shares some of the tools with this character that he's bringing transformation to. But in essence, if you watch, what you will see is one who lives as and brings the context and the presence of active love to every experience, even when this writer's dissing him and being pissy with him. He still stands as that space, rather than, oh, well, if you're going to be like that with me, then I'll just, no. He does it. It's not in him. There's a story that comes from, ostensibly at least, the book of Thomas, one of the books that didn't get canonized in the scriptures. And the disciples, in essence, say to Yeshua, after he's, picking a verbal beating from the Pharisees, they kind of say to Yeshua, why don't you give them back some of their own medicine? Why don't you sock it to them? And Yeshua says, I have none of that in my store. Life is arranged and designed to show you what you have in your store. The way the universe, and it's nothing to do with you're going to be punished for anything. It's just that the universe has been so brilliantly designed through this law of resonance that whatever is in your store, you will draw to you. And when you draw that to you and it brings up what's in your store, you'll either fall into your mind and be asleep or dead, as was spoken about in the prodigal son story, or you'll wake up and to bring love to that. And when you bring conscious, active, present love to an experience, whatever is stored in the body-mind unit begins its dissolution. It's called processing. Watch in that movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the processing that occurs. Watch how Mr. Rogers, and he's not a miracle worker. He's not magic. He's not mystical. He's just in the practice of functioning as love. And he's got his own set of tools for doing it. And what we're working to do, and in fact, we'll take one of the tools that Mr. Rogers demonstrated in the movie, And we'll be integrating that into a love exchange tool that we've used. This will just add another dimension, another piece of the puzzle to it. And that tool was, and in the movie, they're still using the language of the culture that love is something we do to each other, but they will adjust it slightly in instructions. But he's sitting having breakfast with this guy, and this guy's like, "How do you do this?" He says, "Well, I have many tools that I use." And then Mr. Rogers invites him to close his eyes, and the words Mr. Rogers uses is, "Think about everybody who's loved you into existence." Now, I would shift, and when we use this in the intensives, when we do the love exchange and the instructions, we'll change the language slightly to be more accurately reflective of the way things work. But think about, in your life, just take a moment right now and think about everybody, and it might be somebody that you're currently in battle with. It might be somebody that you're separated from, that you never want to see or hear from again. Doesn't matter. But think about everybody that has ever been in your life, that has been there, even for 1 minute of your life, as the conscious, active presence of love. Think of everybody, as Mr. Rogers said, that has loved you into existence. And breathe. Just go back through all the people in your whole life who have actually been there as the active presence of love. And breathe that into your structure. And your assignment, should you choose to accept it, this tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Your assignment is to now bring that to your own life. Make that the context that you experience everything your mind's got to tell you in. And as you do that, everything that's not true from your past will begin to dissolve. You'll go into process. And as that happens, pain, shame, fear, rage, hatred, vengeance, trauma simply begin to slip away, because you're not made for that. You are made to experience yourself as conscious, active, present love, because that's what you are. Now, the Greeks lied to you. The world told you that you were supposed to find somebody to love. In fact, you might remember that tune. Don't you find somebody to love? No, forget it. Never try to love anyone ever in your life, because it's a fraud. You can't do it. Love is what you are. And when you function as who you are, when you bring love to every party, to every gathering, to every joining, then the transmutation of that which is less than love begins to happen. And that's what you're designed for. And so just think of everybody who's been there truly as their human essence, as the presence of love in your life. And if you don't have that experience, then you've got some serious work to do. And the world will argue with you flat and say, I remember one guy when I talked about, love is not a verb, it's a noun, it's not something you do. Well, why can't it be both? Well, because it isn't both. Well, it could be a noun and a verb. Well, let's use an example. I have a bowling ball, and I want to gift you. I have this thing, a noun, called a bowling ball, and I want to gift it to you. So I give you a bowling ball. Can I turn a bowling ball into a verb? To turn a bowling ball into a verb, I'd have to say, and now I'm going to bowling ball you. It just makes no sense. And now I'm going to love you. It makes no sense. But we've been brainwashed in this body-mind unit to believe that not that we are loved, but that it's something we got to go out there and get from somebody else. And if we're always out there looking for it from somebody else, then as the kids said in their song a few decades back, you're looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces. You can't get it there. You got to bring it there. And awaken and uncover the truth of who you are. And it can be difficult because everywhere that life comes along and resonates something in you that's less than love, your breath is going to want to stop, and you're going to want to shut that down and not feel it and not deal with it. Maybe put a fifth of alcohol, of scotch on top of it, or a cup of caffeine, or a so-called energy drink, or a mouthful of sugar, or any of the other legal and illegal drugs. Legal and illegal drugs all do the same thing. You're not designed for that. I can't bowling ball you. I can't love you. But I can be love in your presence. When I realized that Yeshua's directive 2,000 years ago was not to love anybody, but to function as a human being, to function as love in the presence of neighbor. And neighbor means anybody that you think about. Your deepest, darkest, worst enemy or fantasy of enemy. The requirement of being a human, that is, how these eternal forces operate, is you have to bring the eternal force of love that you are created as to this present moment with this present seeming enemy. And guess what happens? You do that, you begin to transform yourself and heal yourself and transform the enemy as well and heal the enemy. Well, I don't want to heal my enemy. Well, that's just your non-being mind and your vengeance talking. So now you see the opportunity to heal vengeance. So now what do? You bring active present love. You make that the context for your vengeance. And guess what happens? Your vengeance starts to heal. And then there's this power in you that in Aramaic they call ruka dukudsha. In Aramaic, it's a feminine elemental force that undoes the effects of your errors and teaches you the truth. You know what? When you allow that, when you invite that elemental force into your process, it doesn't matter if the offense that happened, that you're experiencing the tail end effect of, happened 2,000 years ago and 50 generations back. That power, by definition, will undo the effects of those errors. Literally. What happened 2,000 years ago, if it's in your bloodline, and life resonates and brings it forward, and the context for it coming forward is you as active present love with the willingness to invite this elemental force into activity in you. The shards of glass that came from that experience 2,000 years ago begin to dissolve here and now. And all of the impacts and all of the generations, and who knows out of that experience how many directions those shards of glass went in the thousands of people spawned through those generations, and how many times they met in war and conflict and murder and slaughter and vengeance and rape and pillage. Who knows how many times? But when you make the context of bringing that forward in you, all of those shards begin to be dislodged, and healing happens throughout all of the generations. Jonas Salk, brilliant mind. Not so sure about his vaccine stuff, but something much more powerful that he did is he said the most important thing to be is a good ancestor. Do you cherish that child? Really? Then are you willing to do your work? Because if all you're going to do is verbally or emotionally or physically batter and beat that child around and try to force them into the confines of the world, all you're doing is taking those generational shards and installing them in the child one by one by one. It's called the power person dynamic. Your job, should you choose to do it, is to dislodge those shards of glass. pulling them out, breathing through them, opening your physiology so as to experience yourself as conscious, active, present love in every circumstance where you find yourself. And when you can't, there's your next piece of work. That's what Yeshua meant when he said, be the presence of love. When you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor, and by so doing, you will maintain self. You will be human for eternity. And that's what we're here to support and be a part of in the life of every mind, heart, and being on planet Earth. And so I breathe with you, and once again invite you to just think about everybody in your life who brought the context of active, present love. I've been learning this from my granddaughter, who's now been circling the sun, breathing on her own for about 16 months. And she's taught me on a new level her arrival as the presence of love. Not yet conscious or expressive through her physiology, that my job, when I am her caretaker, is to bring my being present with her, the presence of love. Not my mind's chatter, not my mind's beliefs about what she should do or shouldn't do, none of that. Yes, take care of her physiologically, but more importantly, to bring that space of active present love to her every instant I'm with her, and to see and experience her as that same presence of love. Because the world generally will not give her that gift. The world will have goals for her and other purposes for her that don't involve love. But to see her as that, to hold her as that, to be in that space myself, and to strengthen that energetic presence in her that is in each and every one of us. And by so doing, assisting her, rather than programming her mind with the worlds of beliefs and how to be, the most brilliant student, we're going to get you into the best schools. Baloney. That's all just, strengthening the prison in which people are trapped in their minds. But to hold her and to see her as present love and to keep supporting her, literally through resonance, by experiencing myself and her as who we are, to bring that presence into her physiology so that she never has to leave her Father's house, which is her temple, this body-mind unit. Nothing religious about the journey. It's just, do you live as a human being or don't you? Got nothing to do with all the stuff that the mind is made up about. What do we got? 32,000 sects of Christianity, and God only knows how many sects of every other religion going. Nothing to do with the process of functioning as a human being. So who to use, and when we get into laws of living, if you do that, we'll get into regulatory speech and we'll point out why this language is somewhat off base, but for this moment, it's on track. Who has loved you into existence? Who has been the space of conscious, active, present love for you that strengthens and helps you to incarnate? In the Eastern Orthodox teachings, the whole idea was to incarnate. And to incarnate, there's got to be an immaculate conception. Well, what is that about? What are you talking about? If you got a body mind that's filled with all kinds of trash and garbage, then your perception will be degraded. You've got to clean the instrument. And then there's an immaculate conception. The human being arrives fully formed as love in its own physiology. That's the design of life. And the only thing that will ever satisfy you. And the only thing that will support your generations backward and forward. So that's what we're here to do today. and we hold a space that each and every one of you is advancing in your journey. And how can we support you? What's on your mind? Does that resonate anything for you? And if you're out there in listener land, if you push 1, little hand will go up in the control panel, and Jeannie will say hi and welcome you by your area code. If you're on one of those stations that we can't see in our control panel, the call-in number for the show is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show. If you push 1, we'll be having a conversation. Jeannie, is there anybody out there that's got a hand up in the phone queue, or anybody in the chat room with a thought for us?
No, it is all quiet, and it's been a great opening. So there's bound to be some questions. We've got 12 minutes.
Yeah, gee, that took a little longer than I thought. Thanks for triggering all that, John. So how can we support you? I'm sure there have to be some thoughts or questions. If I had been standing on a platform in your hometown, in your local library or university or church or jail or synagogue or whatever, and I stepped down off the platform having shared what I just shared, and you were in the audience, I know every one of you would be coming over and saying, or wanting to, maybe being too shy or whatever, but coming over and saying, Michael, I just have a quick question. What would your question be based on what we've just talked about for the last 45 minutes? And if you push 1, and we'll go up, and we'll be having a conversation about it. How can we support you? I can't believe nobody's got a question. And your questions are so important. So important. Because there's a power in you and a power in me that has the answer to every question that anyone could ever ask, if we're being to listen to it. That power holds the fulfillment of everything we want to express, experience, and know. But if the mind gets in the way, then the mind goes into its chatter and its noise. The idea of forgiveness is to rid yourself of the mind's chatter and noise and pain and trauma. And then through the law of resonance, whatever question you can ask, because that power in which you live, move, and have your being is universal, all knowledge is there. And when you open yourself to receive that knowledge, then it will be given to you. And the way to open yourself to receive it is to ask the question.
We have a hand up.
Great. Let's say hello.
Area code 423. You are on the air.
Hi, this is Jack in Asheville. And
hey there,
listening
man.
to this,
how are you?
Well, I'm having a little bit of confusion. Namely, sometimes I think I'm in the present, sometimes I know I'm in the past. And I think I need a mind shifter around that.
So tell me about where the confusion's coming in for you.
Well, my conscious logical mind is still active, and it's listening to everything and saying, yeah, that's great. And then something within me says, but am I doing it? And it's like I'm getting ready for that thing called Family Christmas. And
right.
I know if I'm not inflammatory, I've done my part. And I think I will be non-inflammatory by realizing I'm in the moment and saying this is just happening and I'm not part. It's not my real truth. And so anyway, and then words and changing words and Lennon changing. And a word that came up yesterday in church was it said that we receive Emmanuel, not Jesus. God with us, God within us. And when I live from that space, I think I'm doing something that works.
The presence of active love.
Yeah. trying to take care of my physiology today to make sure it's in good shape, and trying not to worry about little details like finance, which is not too bad right now, and just move into dealing with what's happening in the actual world as I can perceive it as best as I can, and not living in that dead past.
So how about the mind shift you were asking for? You got your pen handy?
Yeah, let me get a fresh little piece of paper to write it on here. Fresh paper. Okay, and pen. Go ahead.
It is safe, comma, healing, and restorative.
Okay.
For me to surrender. For me to surrender all of my mind's opinions about what I and others are doing. Are you breathing?
Yeah, I'm writing and breathing and understanding a little bit of it. Namely, just notice that that's the noise my mind is creating, which my mind is good at.
And your job is to bring the context of being to that mind.
Yeah.
And as you do, as you bring active present love to that mind, all of its lies, they're going to surface. They have to surface, and they will dissolve. Mm-hmm. And one of the intermediary steps in that process is that as you bring being with its thoughts forward into a mind that has conflicting thoughts, when those thoughts mix energetically, your background's in physics, when they mix energetically, they're going to create a cloud of unknowing. They're going to create a cloud of confusion. And breathe, and that's just part of the healing process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Absolutely delighted and honored, sir.
And, earlier in the show, I was listening to the other person talking about somebody in the family, and I thought, wait a minute, that sounds a little bit like my story. And then when you talked about the people that love me into existence, I thought of the wonderful people that I was with in my childhood, which did not include my father.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I hear you.
Breathing is the clue for me.
Breathing is the key to it all, yes. And
Okay,
and one of the things I'd suggest you do, Jack, is there anyone that you see that is a model of a male figure that is strong enough to take the posture of a father for you?
I'm working on that. Now, by the way,
what I would do is I'd allow myself to get into a totally quiet, receptive space and mentally invite that person into my space to just hold you in that presence and let whatever's at the root of all of that confusion dissolve.
I'm thinking of such a person that I finally got a connection with just yesterday who may be able to, really be part of my life, and it happens to be a minister.
Sweet.
That I've
awesome
odds with. Suddenly the odds all went away. And here's a quick piece of information that has nothing to do with everything. On Friday, 2 days after Christmas, is my 28th anniversary of not using alcohol and other stuff like that.
Congratulations.
Which was the beginning of change, only the beginning.
Right.
And so on that Friday, I'm going to go to the AA meeting and talk to them about that. And then the next day, there's a meeting of my Narcotics Anonymous group, which is not about drugs. It's about change of life. And it's my celebration day, so I've decided to have somebody who really was there in the beginning talk about his life.
Right.
And, just be supported by the love of those people who have found a solution to their life, which is changing and finding freedom from the bondage of self, basically. That's what they call it, in AA at least. And, that's my quest.
Nothing
and I've been
like
questioning
community.
So, and, by the way, I met you a long, long time ago and kind of put it on this back shelf. And then you came to Asheville and we did some stuff. And then Terry did a thing, and I was still full of anger. But listening to Tim has explained to you in such a way that it all came back. So suddenly I've been with you for a long time.
Sweet. Yeah, that first time way back down in the south side of Fletcher, that had to be close to 30 years ago.
Yeah, that was when you came to Chad O'Shea's little unity.
Right.
And Chad was a very interesting guy, and his guru was, of course, Ram Dass.
Who just passed away yesterday.
Well, that comes to the body sooner or later.
Well, it may not be a requirement. I wouldn't be committed to that if I were you.
Yeah, but I mean, many people have found their place in history somehow, and he's one of them.
Well, through Chad, and of course Chad has left his body, and Ram Dass, with Ram Dass just passing, the fact that you bring him up today, I just hold the space for Chad, for Ram Dass and their journeys, and for each of us in ours. And my offering is, there's this guy 2,000 years ago that said this: to he that overcomes, he will not taste of the second death. He will become a pillar in the temple of my God, and shall go out no more. Now that's a pretty clear promise of physiological eternal life. It's not a religious idea, not a religious concept. He's just saying, you overcome the hostility and fear-based mind. It's only the energetic dynamics of hostility and fear, which are energies that are off the mark. And remember that in Aramaic, the definition of the word sin is off the mark. It's an archery term. If I remove all energetic influences from the cell that are disintegrated to the cell, then the cell is eternal. And we're designed for that. So here's Yeshua 2,000 years ago saying, if you do your work, so he overcomes. The first death is prodigal son. You left the father's house. You went into hostility and fear. And now returning to overcome, to forgive, to remove all hostility and fear and function as a human being is our job. And then you become a pillar in the temple. The temple is your body mind unit. And it says very clearly, shall go out no more. A pillar is a fixture. It's there forever. And I offer that's what we're ultimately designed for. And we've all bought the lie that, well, yeah, but everybody's got to die. That's not what he said. He didn't see those that overcome after they die. They will. He says, here it is. So I'll just leave that thought with you. And in the meantime, everybody, have the best year yet of your eternal lives. It's almost time for the phone to cut us off. Jack, appreciate talking to you. Have a blessing. Great questions. Bye-bye.